It happened so fast, I didn't even have time to blink. 9:03 a.m. One hand gripped the edge of the conference table. The other held the near-final draft of the $2.8 billion aerospace licensing agreement, freshly printed, marked up, and signed by every party except ours. My coffee sat beside me, still hot, untouched. I remember thinking the deal looked solid. I remember thinking this was going to be a good day. Then Jackson Creel walked in. He didn't sit, didn't clear his throat, didn't wait for the engineers or junior counsel to finish their updates. He simply leaned forward, adjusted his cuff, and said it. "We're letting you go, Dawson, effective immediately." For a second, I thought he was talking to someone else. For a second, I still believed I mattered. No one in the room made eye contact. Not Aaron from compliance, not Marcy, who had shadowed me through 3 fiscal years. Just silence. I started to respond, but Jackson raised a hand, like I was interrupting something he had already decided. "We need leadership that aligns with our vision," he continued, eyes on the screen behind me. "Velocity, adaptability, less legacy baggage." Legacy baggage. That's what I was now. I had given Aravista Systems 18 years. I survived 3 CEOs, 1 hostile takeover, and a cyber attack that nearly burned down our defense division. I built the contract system they now depend on. I wrote the playbook. And Jackson? He arrived 4 months ago from a tech startup that didn't survive its second round of funding. Young, loud, brilliant on paper. The board ate it up. He wanted recognition. I wanted results. He wanted to impress investors. I wanted to protect the foundation. He wanted my seat, but not the weight that came with it. He stepped around the table and tugged the contract from my hands. "We'll take it from here," he said, flashing a grin. "The $6.7 billion EDA deal is going out today. Should make the quarter look real nice." I said nothing, because he had just removed the only person who understood the system well enough to know, without my signature, that deal had 9 minutes to live. I didn't say anything when I walked out of that boardroom. The hallway lights felt brighter than usual, sharper. Or maybe that was just the sting. I didn't rush, didn't cry. I just kept walking, the contract still tucked under my arm. Like muscle memory. The $2.8 billion deal I'd spent the last year building. The one that was supposed to fund my father's name into something lasting. I pressed the elevator button. It dinged too cheerfully. And as the doors closed around me, sealing me off from the silence upstairs, the memory hit before I could stop it. 18 years. That's how long I gave Aravista. I started here as a temp assistant when I was 24. My resume didn't scream Ivy League. I had a community college degree and a mother who mopped these floors on the night shift. She used to call me her secret agent when I stayed late to help the contract team file paperwork. What she didn't know was that I wasn't filing. I was reading. Every clause. Every signature line. Every red line. I taught myself how to spot inconsistencies faster than the junior analysts. And eventually, someone noticed. From temp to assistant to coordinator. Then regional contracts. Then international compliance. Then, slowly, stubbornly, Senior VP of Strategic Partnerships. I never had a mentor. No one opened doors for me. I held them open for myself until they stopped slamming shut. I survived 3 CEOs, 1 near acquisition, and a compliance breach that would have sunk the company if I hadn't caught the mismatched clause buried on page 214. They like to say I was intense. That's fine. Intensity keeps planes in the air and governments under contract. But here's the part no one knew, not even HR. That bonus from the $2.8 billion aerospace contract? It wasn't going toward a vacation or some penthouse condo downtown. It was for a scholarship fund. I'd been working quietly with a nonprofit to create the Arthur Vail Initiative, named after my father. He was a welder, spent most of his life fixing things that other people broke, only to be replaced by machines in the end. He never had a chance to go to college. And it haunted him. Not for himself, But for what it meant, I had to do twice as much, twice as fast, just to be seen. This fund was going to give scholarships to first-generation engineering students, trade school, technical colleges, aerospace apprenticeships, real paths for real kids. I wanted it to mean something. I wanted him to mean something. Last year, Accessant Global approached me, a competitor, twice the salary, full autonomy, unlimited resources. I turned them down. Loyalty still means something. I told them, I'm not done here yet. At the time, I believed that. I truly did. But now I stood in that elevator, staring at my reflection in the chrome panel. My badge still hung from my neck, my name beneath the company logo. My fingers trembled. Not from anger, but from loss. Loss of purpose, of trust, of 18 years of thinking I was part of something that wouldn't treat me like a used tool. The doors slid open to the lobby. A security guard glanced up but didn't stop me. Not yet. Maybe the email hadn't reached him. Maybe my name hadn't been erased from the system yet. I stepped outside into the cool air and blinked into the sunlight. They thought I was finished, that I was obsolete, replaceable, outdated. But what they didn't realize was I had outlived their usefulness. And soon, they'd remember how much they still depended on mine. The engine hummed quietly beneath me as I sat in my car, still gripping my badge like it might reverse what had just happened. 18 years of loyalty, replaced. In a sentence. As I stared through the windshield, the memory of how it started came back like a bruise blooming under skin. Slow. Dark. Inevitable. It started the day Jackson Creel walked into Aravista like he owned the building. He wasn't wearing a name tag like the rest of us at the quarterly town hall. He didn't need one. Everything about him screamed arrival. Tailored navy suit, pocket square, no laptop, just a sleek tablet he barely touched. He smiled like he was already bored, then delivered a 10-minute talk about evolution over preservation that had half the board leaning forward like he'd whispered a secret meant just for them. The title was new, Chief Growth Officer. No one had held it before. We didn't even know what it meant. But it didn't take long to figure it out. He was the board's wrecking ball. At first, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. New people come in. Visions shift. It happens. But Jackson didn't just want to change things. He wanted to erase what came before him. He replaced department heads with people from his past ventures, people who nodded fast and questioned slow. He moved fast. Too fast. Canceling long-term vendor relationships, rewriting policy frameworks without compliance sign-off, suggesting we replace our contract review teams with AI-generated summaries. Isn't the whole contract thing just formatting and common sense? He said once. Across a room full of legal staff who blinked like they'd been slapped. I remember biting the inside of my cheek so hard it bled. He didn't like me from the beginning. I didn't defer to him. I didn't flatter. I didn't need him. And worse, I didn't trust him. He knew it. He hated that I still had influence, that my signature was required to trigger any contract above $1 billion, that I could walk into a room with a 4-star general and not blink. He called people like me legacy bloat, never to my face. But in those closed-door reorg meetings, I heard things. We've got too many old engines running this place. Time to clear the hangar. 2 months ago, I almost lost my job. Quietly. There was a system lag on a $740 million vendor deal. Jackson had insisted on bypassing our phased approval workflow to move faster. It backfired. Timelines slipped, signatures mismatched, and the entire draft had to be scrapped. Then came the internal report, sent to the executive board, not routed through legal, claimed the delay stemmed from my department failing to update contract templates. But audit logs don't lie. Our IT lead, Brandon, flagged the access override, done by one of Jackson's own hires. He quietly sent me the server report with a single-line message. Check the metadata timestamps. They're setting you up. I did. And I brought it. Quietly. To legal. Not to fight. Just to clarify. The board didn't say a word. They shelved the report. No apologies, no fallout. But Jackson didn't forget that I survived it. And I knew then. He'd wait until the spotlight was on something bigger, louder, something too important for anyone to notice he was switching the pilot mid-flight. That something turned out to be the $6.7 billion EDA deal, the very one he smiled about as he yanked the $2.8 billion draft from my hands this morning like I was just the delivery girl. What he didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that the system tied to the EDA contract required a signature token coded into the back end. Mine. And without it. His perfect PR rollout would be nothing more than digital dust. He thought he was clearing out dead weight, but the system was still listening, and it didn't recognize his voice. The key fob clicked, and the car locked behind me. I didn't turn back to look at the building. I just sat behind the wheel in silence, hands resting on the steering wheel like I was waiting for instructions. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. There was a strange calmness in knowing something they didn't. From the glove compartment, I pulled out a small encrypted flash drive. Matte black, fingerprint protected. I hadn't touched it in months, but it pulsed softly when I held it, like it was waking up. "Let's see if you still remember me," I whispered. It did. 7 months earlier. A near disaster no one ever talked about. We'd almost sent out a major procurement contract worth $800 million with a forged signature. Not from some outside hacker, from an assistant who had access to the wrong permissions and too much ambition. The override was caught just in time, buried in the final metadata log. We salvaged the deal, swept it under a rug woven with NDAs. No headlines, no fallout. But I didn't forget. I spent 3 nights reworking the back end of our digital contract system. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in prevention. That's when I wrote the protocol now known, only in hidden logs and legal's archives, as Clause 9X. A simple rule. If the token signature does not match the original contract architect, the system will initiate auto-null within 9 minutes. It wasn't loud. It didn't display red flags or alerts. It simply waited. Quiet and cold. Before disassembling everything, convincing legal was harder than writing the clause. Too rigid, they said. What if a director leaves the company mid-process? I explained the difference between flexibility and foolishness. We'd nearly lost $1 billion contract because someone forgot that digital signatures aren't just boxes to check. They're keys. If someone removes the original lock, the door shouldn't open. It should disappear. They agreed, reluctantly, but the final approval had to come from our newly hired Chief Growth Officer, Jackson Creel. He skimmed the document in a 5-minute hallway meeting, gave it a smug smile, and said, "If it makes us look more secure to the board, stamp it." He signed off without a second thought. Never read the technical attachment. Never asked why the kill switch was set to exactly 9 minutes. Marketing-friendly paranoia, he called it. I embedded Clause 9X into every contract exceeding $1 billion, including the $6.7 billion EDA deal. I didn't tell anyone. There was no need. When I drafted the EDA agreement, I tied the execution to one token, D-Veil 17X, my digital signature. Hard-coded, unclonable, required, no token, no execution, no exception. The system would accept inputs, cue the transaction, and begin the silent countdown. For 9 minutes, it would look as if nothing was wrong. And then, collapse, back in the car. I logged into the offline dashboard tied to Clause 9X. There it was. Token mismatch detected. Protocol, sunset. Time remaining, 6 minutes and 42 seconds. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched. Because this wasn't revenge. This was the protocol, the one he approved, the one he never read, and the one that would make sure no one ever again thought they could rewrite a system by simply replacing the woman who built it. I walked back into the building like I'd forgotten something. Because I had. My name. Not the one printed on the badge still hanging from my neck, but the one I built. Slowly, year by year, desk by desk, deal by deal. Dawson Vale. The woman who never missed a clause, never needed praise, and never lost a contract. Now I was just another departure to be swept quietly under the rug. The hallway leading to my office was quieter than I remembered. No morning chatter, no heels clicking, just silence, and the kind of stillness that happens when people are afraid to be associated with someone who just got escorted out of the boardroom. I didn't blame them. I didn't even look at them. I just kept walking. My desk hadn't been touched. The computer was still logged in. My water bottle was exactly where I left it. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. I reached under the desk and pulled out a cardboard box. No logo, no tape, just 4 flaps of brown silence, waiting to be filled. I opened the top drawer first. A photo of my father, helmet in hand, grease on his cheek, smiling like he knew something I didn't. I placed it gently into the box. Next came the notebook I'd used during EDA meetings, full of diagrams, half-sketched flight patterns, margin notes in shorthand only I could decipher. Then the metal paperweight I was given during my first promotion, a chipped mug from a trade show in Oslo, and finally, the nameplate, Dawson Vale, Senior VP, Strategic Partnerships. It had been slightly crooked for years. I never fixed it. I don't know why. I paused at the door. The box in my arms heavier than it should have been. Marcy rounded the corner. She froze. We hadn't spoken in weeks, not since Jackson started tightening the reins. Her eyes were already red. She took one step forward, and then stopped, like something invisible had pulled her back. I watched her battle herself. "I didn't know it was happening today," she whispered, voice cracking. I nodded once. "It's okay," I said. I did. She looked like she wanted to hug me, but she didn't. Not because she didn't care, because she was scared. I didn't blame her for that, either. The lobby was colder than I remembered. The security guard gave me a stiff nod. No smile this time. I scanned out. My badge still worked, for now. That's how it ends, I thought. Not with applause, not even with a handshake. Just a beep, a cardboard box, and a door that closes behind you, like it's been waiting to. I slid into the driver's seat and placed the box gently on the passenger side. The car smelled like lemon cleaner and old ambition. I unlocked my phone, expecting the severance email. Instead, I saw this. Authorization token missing. 9-minute expiry countdown initiated. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was surprised, because it had begun. The system wasn't waiting for permission. It wasn't asking for me to push a button. It had detected the absence, my absence, and done exactly what it was designed to do. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat back, buckled my seatbelt, and let the countdown continue. Because sometimes, the cleanest revenge is simply being missed. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands frozen around the steering wheel. The engine wasn't even on. I could still see the outline of the building through the windshield, shiny, smug, and quiet, as if nothing had happened. But something had. A single line of text still glowed on my phone. Authorization token missing. 9-minute expiry countdown initiated. It had been less than 3 minutes since I'd walked out. 7 minutes left to stop it all. 7 minutes to save the $6.7 billion deal. 7 minutes to prove I wasn't bitter, wasn't cruel, wasn't who they painted me to be. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over Bridget's name. Head of legal. One call, and she'd flag the clause, override the auto void, and restore the system access. I had written that clause as a security protocol, not a weapon. I could stop it. I stared at the glowing blue call button. A part of me, maybe the better part, wanted to press it. Not for Jackson, not for the company, but for the engineers, the assistants, the interns who used to drop coffee on their own laptops and run to me with wide, terrified eyes. They didn't deserve the fallout. My father's voice drifted in from some quiet corner of my memory. Always leave your name clean, Dawson, even when they drag it through the dirt. But before I could press the button, my iPad buzzed in the passenger seat. I glanced down. A new email. Subject line. Transition strategy. Internal eyes only sender. Jackson Creel sent to executive team. And by some mistake, or maybe a ghost of an old distribution list, it had been CC'd to me. I tapped it open. The body of the message was brief. Corporate speak. Mostly. A lot of language about restructuring, optimization, stakeholder alignment. My name wasn't mentioned once, but near the bottom. One casual line hit harder than any severance notice. No worries. She was just a placeholder. Let's clean up her mess. Jackson. I stared at it. A placeholder. 18 years, 11 major contracts, 3 international deployments. The auto-authentication protocol that now held their billion-dollar deal hostage. A placeholder. My thumb slid away from the call button. Bridget's name faded from the screen. I didn't delete it. I just let it go. I closed the message, closed the laptop, sat there and let the silence settle. 6 minutes left. I could almost hear the countdown ticking in the background, somewhere inside the system. A quiet, mechanical heartbeat they didn't know was theirs. I didn't hate them. That was the strange part. Hate would have been simpler. But I had trusted them. I had believed I could outwork the politics, outrun the suspicion, outlast the cycles of new leadership with big teeth and shallow vision. I was wrong. Jackson had made that perfectly clear. I reached for the keys and turned the ignition. My rearview mirror caught the sunlight bouncing off the building's polished glass. I didn't look twice. They would figure it out. Too late. I almost saved them. Almost. But you don't save people who don't see you. You don't fix things for someone who calls your life's work a mess. You don't forgive someone who looks at 18 years and calls it replaceable. So I drove away, and behind me. The clock ticked down. By the time I pulled onto the freeway, the sun had broken clean through the clouds, bright and indifferent. My hands were still trembling on the wheel when I glanced down at my phone. The system alert was still there, pulsing quietly at the top of my screen. Authorization token missing. 9-minute expiry countdown initiated. I didn't smile. Not really. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, just a strange, dense stillness. A silence that said, "This is no longer your problem." But across town, in a glass-walled conference room on the 38th floor, Jackson Creel was all confidence and teeth. He stood at the head of the table like a showrunner on opening night, flipping through slides while legal, finance, and strategy teams waited for their marching orders. On screen was the crown jewel, the finalized $6.7 billion partnership with Ethereum Systems. "Let's move," he said, tapping the edge of the screen. "Legal, send the bundle. Finance, attach final disclosures. And someone get me a press draft ready by 10. A junior associate from the legal team, Michael, I think his name was, raised his hand hesitantly. "Sir, the digital cert validation hasn't returned a green light. It says, signature token mismatch." Jackson didn't miss a beat. "Ignore it. Probably a caching issue. Just override." Michael frowned. We can't override this one, sir. It's part of the new hardened protocol." "Then get someone who can." He turned to his assistant, Britta, and gestured with a little too much force. "Loop in IT and make this go away." Behind the screen, behind the calm, something flickered in her eyes. Not panic, not yet, but something just short of fear. Across the hall, one of the engineers who'd helped me design the token verification system, Noah, was watching error flags stack up on his monitor. one after another. Red, red, red. He double-checked the timestamp. 9:03 a.m. Exactly the moment I was dismissed. The system had already been triggered. The digital handshake never completed. And unless the original token, my token, was re-authenticated within 9 minutes, the entire contract packet would auto-nullify and lock down across all servers. But that wasn't the worst part. Jackson had demanded the internal alert logs be silenced. He didn't want the system pinging legal, and certainly not the board. And when Noah pushed back, gently, just to clarify, Britta was the one who intercepted. "Just do what he says," she whispered. "Please." She glanced down at her tablet. A message had just arrived in the CC thread for senior staff. From Jackson. "No worries, she was just a placeholder. Let's clean up her mess." She looked up slowly, her throat tightening. She had known me since I was a lead analyst 15 years ago, before Jackson even had a badge. And while she didn't say it out loud, in that moment, she knew this wasn't oversight. It was arrogance. And arrogance has a countdown. 6 minutes and 42 seconds. Michael called across the table again. "Still not verifying. Sir, we're locked out of the cert chain." Jackson was losing his charm. "Then escalate it. There's no reason a contract this size should bottleneck because of a missing whatever that token is." "It's not just a token," Noah muttered under his breath, half to himself. "It's her." But no one heard him. Or maybe they did, and pretended they didn't. The system logs were still active, quietly writing everything, every ping, every override attempt, every internal suppression. And outside, somewhere past the highway signs, I was still driving, still silent. My coffee had gone cold. My fingers rested lightly over the dashboard, not touching anything, not deciding, just waiting. I could have called, still had the contacts, still had legal's direct line. Could have texted one word and reversed the entire sequence. But I didn't, because somewhere deep in the system, buried inside the fine print Jackson never bothered to read, was a truth he'd signed with his own name. If the primary token holder is removed from the org chart without transitional authorization, the chain collapses. He dismissed me like a printer error. And now the system was simply honoring his request. 3 minutes remaining. The room had gone quiet. No one knew what to say. They'd bet everything on a system they never understood. They fired the last person who did. 9:12 a.m. I was still in my car when the message came through. A soft ping from the dashboard console. Almost too gentle for what it carried. Contract invalidated. Signature token mismatch. Global execution revoked. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared at it. And I remember thinking, that's it. That's the line. That's the moment the building starts to fall. I didn't do it to destroy anything, not really. But I had warned them, 2 years ago, about the vulnerability of digital approvals. That one stolen credential could burn down an empire. They laughed. I built the safeguard anyway. And now, here we were. Across town, back on the 22nd floor of Aerovista's headquarters. I imagined the room erupting. I didn't have to be there to hear it. The sharp gasp of someone on the sales team. The sudden stammer of a junior legal aide realizing the outgoing contract had no valid token. The mounting panic as the system rejected override after override. I knew the protocol. Once the 9-minute window expired, without the originator's digital seal, the deal was flagged, revoked, and quarantined globally. I had built it that way for good reason, for protection, for integrity. They used to value those things. But now, the foreign aerospace firm, our largest strategic partner, had just yanked their entire offer. The $6.7 billion deal Jackson had been bragging about in hushed boardroom whispers? Gone. Not renegotiated, not delayed. Gone. Pulled in under 60 seconds with one cold. Clinical notice. Violation of International Signature Verification Protocol. Engagement terminated, effective immediately. That line hit harder than I expected. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. Instead, I let out a slow breath and watched the steam rise from the coffee I still hadn't touched. It had gone lukewarm, like everything else I once poured myself into. In my rearview mirror, I watched two Aerovista employees step outside, phones glued to their ears, talking frantically into the wind. One of them was the CFO's executive assistant. Her face looked hollow. I guessed the first shareholder alerts had just gone out. I wouldn't know until later that the stock would plunge over 14% before lunchtime, and that Jackson Creel would be quietly removed as representative signatory from the company's executive board within the hour. But I didn't need headlines to know. You can feel a ship sinking even when you're no longer aboard, especially when you were the one who built the engines and the kill switch, back in that conference room where I had stood 9 minutes earlier with a contract 94% complete. Jackson had smiled like a man already drinking champagne. He thought he had won, that he could tear me out like an old page and pencil in someone new. That loyalty was outdated, that creators could be replaced by copy machines in better suits. He hadn't read the fine print. He hadn't remembered that 2 years ago, after a near-miss forgery attempt by a subcontractor. I'd spent 7 weeks rewriting our global deployment protocols. That every outgoing high-stakes contract now required a final, time-stamped, biometric-backed token only the project originator could assign. That it wasn't just a signature, it was me. He signed off on it himself, never read a word. And this morning, at 9:03, he fired the one person whose signature could have saved the company's largest deal. At 9:12, the universe answered back. I looked at the clock on my dash again. 9:12 a.m. They wouldn't remember the time the way I would. They'd remember the chaos, the lawsuits, the media frenzy, the investors' fury. But I'd remember the stillness, the strange, deep quiet that comes right after everything breaks. The kind that says, "You tried to erase me, but I left my name where you didn't look." And now? Now they were going to learn what it meant to fire a systems architect without reading the architecture. I didn't need to be in the room to know what it looked like. By 9:13 a.m., they thought they had won. By 9:15, their emails started bouncing. By 9:17, the system logs began screaming. From the driver's seat of my car, parked 2 blocks away in the shade of a trembling oak tree, I could already picture the chaos unraveling floor by floor. Jackson would be standing at the head of the conference table, still smug from the stunt he pulled an hour earlier. A man, too, used to pushing paper and people without resistance. Then the first alert must have hit. A soft chime from their internal contract management system, probably ignored. Then a second, a flashing red bar that read, "Token validation failed, signature mismatch," followed by a one-line system response. "Contract will automatically void at 9:12 a.m. unless the token is confirmed before then." I imagined the color draining from Jackson's face. I wasn't watching to gloat. Not yet. I was watching because I knew what was coming next. Inside, Jackson was scrambling, barking orders to IT like a man trying to duct tape a dam. "Override it," he would have snapped. "Bypass her token. Revalidate manually. Do it now." But the system doesn't work that way. They designed it that way because I insisted. Because 3 years ago, after someone tried to forge my name on a preliminary contract draft, I rewrote the control logic myself. Back then, I said it was to protect the company. Truth was, I just didn't trust them. I'd even named the protocol after my father's birth date. A quiet nod to the man who taught me that real security wasn't about firewalls. It was about people, about knowing who holds the key, and what they'd do with it. I sipped my coffee slowly as I watched the minutes crawl forward. Inside the war room, their voices would be rising. Legal would have shown up by now. IT pulling up access logs, trying to decode the lockdown. Then someone would have opened the contract metadata. scrolled past the approval list, and there it was. Bold, simple, irreversible. System owner, D. Vale. That moment, I wish I could have seen Jackson's face. I know how he operates. He'd try to recover composure, act like this was a glitch. He'd turn to the engineers and say, "Reset it! Who gave her that much control?" Then the twist of the knife. One of them, probably Taylor, the senior sysadmin, would look him in the eye and say, "You did, 2 years ago. You signed off on the update, page 12. Maybe there'd be a pause. Or maybe Jackson would keep pressing. "Get her on the phone, right now. Tell her we'll reinstate her. Full title, full back pay." I wasn't answering. I watched my phone buzz 3 times in a row. No caller ID. Then a message. "We're sorry for the confusion earlier today. Could we schedule a call to clarify a few things?" No. You may not. The final blow came not from me, but from the market. At 9:38 a.m., Aerovista's CEO received notice that the International Defense Board had pulled out of the $6.7 billion licensing deal due to unauthorized digital discrepancies. In plain English, their signature was invalid, their system didn't match, and only one person in the world could reset it. Me. The auto-expiry clause I embedded was designed to burn the contract completely if the proper token wasn't verified within 9 minutes. Not pause, not notify, burn. I'd made sure of it. Back at HQ, Jackson was likely pacing in circles now, tie loose, hair damp from sweat, legal scrambling to draft a statement, PR panicking, shareholders already calling in, and someone, finally, would click the audit trail on the dashboard and see a single uneditable line. Primary architect, Dawson Vale. Last authorized override attempt, blocked final status, non-recoverable contract error. That was the moment they realized it wasn't a glitch. It was a decision. I didn't destroy the company. I just walked away with the only key. And they, so sure I had outlived my usefulness, were now locked out of their own empire. Pounding on glass they themselves had built. The irony? They gave me the match. I just let it burn. They thought locking me out would end the story. Instead, it gave them a front-row seat to their own unraveling. By 9:50 a.m., the boardroom on the 13th floor was flooded with tension so thick, you could chew it. Word had gotten out fast. The Aerovista deal had collapsed. The $6.7 billion contract, once bragged about in investor meetings, was now legally void, flagged internationally for a signature violation. Jackson was called in without a prep team, without his usual polished slides. Just him, and the weight of everything he'd tried to bury. I wasn't in that room, but I didn't need to be. When a building catches fire, you can still feel the heat from the parking lot. I parked across the street. The same beige blazer still folded on my passenger seat from earlier that morning. I had no plan to walk back in. I didn't need to. Jackson would burn the place down himself. According to a friend in tech compliance, who I'd quietly mentored years ago, the boardroom projector flickered with damning screenshots, internal logs from the digital signature system, a manual override attempt, time-stamped entries, and Jackson's own account forcibly trying to bypass the signature verification and failing. Then came the kicker, the audit trail from 4 days ago. Jackson had requested the system admin to clean up redundant owner metadata and remove legacy tokens. The admin pushed back. He said the change could trigger automatic void conditions if the token failed to verify. Jackson overrode him anyway and signed off, digitally, with his own executive key. Every chair in that room leaned back in silent recoil. Someone, I'm told it was Surya Patel, VP of Operations, asked him point blank, "Were you aware that the original signatory conditions still named Ms. Dawson Vale as the only authorized token holder?" Jackson stammered. The clause was buried in a security patch, obsolete language. It was supposed to be removed. That's when another board member, Mr. Laurel from the Asia-Pacific delegation, raised his hand, calmly, then delivered the twist I hadn't seen coming myself. "We've spoken to Aravista. They're willing to renegotiate, but only if Ms. Vale leads the restructured contract." They could have heard a pen drop. Jackson looked like a man with the ground shifting beneath him. He reached for a bottle of water, but didn't drink, just twisted the cap until his fingers turned white. "Ms. Vale is no longer with the company," he muttered. Laurel didn't flinch. "They're aware. That's part of the condition." Somewhere in that moment, I think he finally understood. All the power plays, the showmanship, the calculated cruelty, it had all been built on a foundation that wasn't his. The system, the clients, the trust. None of it had ever truly belonged to him. I sat there in my car, watching executives scurry behind frosted glass like ants in a shattered colony. I didn't smile, not out of coldness, just clarity. They say revenge is sweet, but this wasn't revenge. This was recognition. After 18 years of holding the line, building something that could outlast egos and regimes, I was finally seen not as a relic, but as the architect. It was 10:02 a.m. when my phone buzzed. A message from legal. This time, not automated. "Board would like to speak with you at your earliest availability. Confidential. Urgent!" I turned the screen off and sat in silence. Sometimes, you don't need to storm the gates. Sometimes, the gates open themselves when they realize the only person who can rebuild the kingdom was the one they exiled. I was still parked 3 blocks away from the AeroCorps tower, hands resting on the steering wheel. Engine off. My phone was on silent, but I could feel it vibrating every few minutes. Texts, missed calls, most of them from legal, some from HR, a few from unknown numbers I didn't bother checking. I stared through the windshield as the morning light shifted on the building's glass panels. Just hours ago, I had stood in that boardroom holding the final 94% draft of a $2.8 billion aerospace agreement. Now, I was on the outside, watching them scramble to patch what they'd broken. I didn't feel rage, not anymore. Just a quiet stillness. Not peace, something else. Something colder. A clarity that made it easy to sit there and do absolutely nothing. Then, at 10:25 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a domestic number. The country code was Plauen 41. Zurich. I stared at it for a few seconds, thumb hovering over the screen. And then I answered. "Ms. Vale?" the voice said, clipped, professional, with a polished European cadence. "This is Matthias Kruger, Strategic Director at Aravista Aerospace. I hope I'm not calling at an inconvenient time." I almost laughed. Inconvenient? I'd just been publicly discarded like expired inventory. I said nothing. "We would like to extend a formal offer," he continued, as if reading from a script. "Not to renegotiate the voided contract. We understand the terms have expired, and AeroCorps no longer holds the necessary authorization. Rather, we would like to engage with you directly, to lead the project under your own entity." That made me sit up. "I'm sorry, what?" "We've terminated all discussions with AeroCorps. Their system breach and failure to comply with signature integrity protocols have rendered them ineligible for global clearance. But we still need this project, and we believe you're the only person who can deliver it." "I don't work for AeroCorps anymore," I said carefully. "We're aware," he said. "We've also been aware, for 6 months now, that you registered a private LLC, Vale Dynamics Inc., in Delaware, and secured 3 independent development licenses through a Boston legal firm." The air in the car suddenly felt thinner. "You were monitoring me?" "Not monitoring. Watching. With interest. We knew the system you built was worth more than the company housing it. We waited to see if you would act. You didn't reach out to us first. That's why we're calling now." I leaned back against the seat, staring up at the roof of my car, my fingers curled into a fist on my thigh. 6 months ago, I'd quietly registered the company, just in case, not out of disloyalty, out of self-preservation. And now, it was the only bridge left standing. "What are you offering?" I asked. "A new deal," he said. "A fresh contract, full autonomy. You'll lead the engineering, project oversight, and international deployment teams, with a starting offer of $1.1 billion and clause authority routed exclusively through Veil Dynamics." I didn't respond right away. In the distance, a delivery truck pulled into the AeroCore loading bay. I watched a man in a security vest gesture toward the building, unaware of anything that had just happened inside. 18 years. 18 years of my life. Countless nights at my desk. Designing protocols no one else could replicate. Stabilizing systems others said were impossible. And I'd been cast out in a 9-minute conversation, while my coffee was still hot. "You hesitated," Matthias said, not accusing, just observing. "I didn't hesitate," I answered. "I reflected." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "We'll have draft documents sent by the hour. We trust you'll know where to route them." I hung up and sat still for another minute. Then I reached for my iPad and checked my business inbox. The custom Veil Dynamics domain I'd set up half a year ago was live. Servers, license anchors, everything. I started the car and eased out of the parking space. As I turned left, I passed the front lobby of AeroCore without glancing back. A notification flashed across the car's dashboard screen. "Incoming file. Veil, Dynamics, Technical Contract V1.0.pdf. Sender, Aerovista Aerospace, Zurich HQ." I smiled. Barely. They fired me thinking I'd disappear. I didn't disappear. I redirected. The cafe was quiet. Just the low hum of an espresso machine and the occasional clink of glass against ceramic. I sat near the window, sunlight pouring across the small round table where my coffee sat. Still hot, for the first time in what felt like weeks. I wasn't racing against a clock or glancing over my shoulder. No legal team shadowing me, no board members dissecting my worth. Just me, a warm drink, and the front page headline staring back from my tablet. "Breaking, Jackson Creel resigns amid contract signature scandal." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply exhaled, slowly, quietly, as if releasing the final breath held from a battle already won. Across from me, my laptop chimed. I pulled it closer and tapped to wake the screen. The Veil Dynamics portal blinked to life. My name, Dawson Veil, appeared at the top. Beneath the words "Primary Contract Authority." No co-signature required. No higher-up to forward it to. Just me. And the future I'd built in secret. A new message was waiting. Final draft. International licensing agreement. $7.1 billion. Ready for authentication. The numbers meant something this time. Not just profit margins or shareholder value. It meant academic grants, energy access for underserved regions, scholarships in my father's name. I had planned every detail over months of late nights, whispering dreams into the dark as Jackson stood on stage parading my work like it had been his all along. I sipped my coffee, still warm, still mine. And then, I did the thing Jackson could never bring himself to do. I earned it. And I claimed it. My hand hovered over the authorize and sign button. Voice verification required. I leaned closer, spoke clearly. "Primary architect, Dawson Veil. Authorization confirmed." A soft tone followed. The deal was done. I leaned back, letting the silence hold me for a while. Across the screen, news tickers scrolled without mercy. AeroCore shares down 18% after voided 6.7B contract. Anonymous source confirms CEO ignored security protocol. Legal board uncovers manual override attempt by executive team. I watched a grainy clip of Jackson stepping through the main exit of AeroCore headquarters. Same suit, different man. His shoulders were hunched, his steps unsteady. The crowd outside didn't cheer, they just watched. And he knew. I remembered the moment he stood in front of me. 9:03 a.m. Eyes cold. Voice cutting. "You've outlived your usefulness." He believed it. They all did. But usefulness isn't something you age out of. It's something you carry with you, coded into your fingerprint, your voice, your ideas. It can't be stolen. It can only be given. And I had stopped giving. I could have called that day, could have warned them when I saw the countdown initiate, could have saved the deal, the company, even his job. But I didn't. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I hated them, but because I'd finally accepted the truth. I didn't destroy them. I just stopped holding them up. The betrayal, the condescension, the boardroom whispers behind closed doors. None of it could follow me now. I'd outgrown the walls they built to contain me. My phone buzzed beside the tablet. A new message. From the international partner who'd triggered the collapse with a single clause violation. "Looking forward to rebuilding, on your terms this time." I let the words settle. My name was on the documents now, not buried in the footnotes, not whispered behind some executive's title. Mine. All of it. There was a time I would have given anything to stay at AeroCorps, to keep contributing, to prove I was more than just the woman behind the systems. But now, I knew better. Some empires deserve to fall, others deserve to be built right, from the ground up. I reached forward, closed the laptop, and took one last sip of coffee. In the corner of the screen, just before it faded to black, my final system message blinked. Contract finalized. Veil Dynamics. Authorization D.Veil. They thought they'd win without my name. They forgot it was my name that made the system work. Behind every system that works, there's someone like me, someone they tried to erase. This wasn't just about a $2.8 billion contract or a digital signature. It was about standing up when they said I was done. It was about walking away without a fight, but with a plan. And maybe, just maybe, it was about finally choosing to stop saving the empire that never once tried to save me. If you've ever been pushed aside, replaced, or told you were no longer needed, I see you. And I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Even if it's just a single hi, to say you've reclaimed something they never thought you would. If this story spoke to you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to the channel. I'll be here, sharing more stories like mine. Because sometimes the quietest exits leave the loudest echoes.